Welcome to The Rewind, an R News monthly podcast
where we discuss various different topics in the Bahamian society.
I'm your host, Jasmine Lundy.
I'm your co-host, Janae.
I don't like eggs enough.
I get the vibe.
Right, let's put that on a shirt.
Go by our last names.
Yeah.
This is The Rewind.
Welcome to The Rewind. You are tuned into episode 5 of our podcast. And this episode is going to be all about the orange economy. Now, we're your hosts, Janae Winter and Jasmine Lundy. But we have two amazing guests here with us, Jodie Minnis and John Cox. Now, we know you guys as, really talented artists, but for the audience sake, kind of tell us more of who you are and what you do. John, I'll pass it over to you first.
Okay, so thank you very much for having me on the show.
Yes,
first of all,
we're so excited that you're here.
I appreciate it and the opportunity. Thank you very much. So I guess, I have a couple of hats. So the one that is most relevant to where we are. So I'm the executive director for arts and culture for the Bahama Resort, which in short just means that I, along with my team, are responsible for all of the visual art and all of the cultural and arts, like capital A with a S, programming that takes place at the resort. I have an art practice, which I've had for almost 30 years now. So I'm a practicing artist, and also I am the chairman of the board of directors for the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas. And a friend of Jodie's, which is most important. I should have led with that.
And I too am John's friend.
Good that we both think that.
Yeah, we love the friendship vibes.
Right. So I am the exhibitions and programming director of Turin Gallery, which is a commercial art gallery as well. Yeah, you should come. I also have an artistic practice like John. It's not as prolific as his, but working at it. I'm also a art writer, so I write about contemporary Bahamian and Caribbean art. And although this falls under the umbrella of what I do at Turn, I think it should be specified that I'm a curator as well of contemporary Bahamian and Caribbean art.
Awesome. And you may notice that our set looks a bit different, a little fancy. I just want to shout out to Echo. Thank you so much for allowing us to shoot the rewind here. We are so grateful. We're surrounded by art, talking about the orange economy. I mean, what better place to be at, okay? So you guys definitely make sure to come to Echo. They're always having events. Check out the art here, beautiful art. And let's continue this discussion.
Right, so as Janae mentioned, we are talking about the orange economy. So I would like for you both to tell me your definition of the orange economy. John, we'll start with you.
So I'm sure the orange economy could be defined in a lot of different ways, but I think maybe the simple entry to it is the part of the economy that's informed by the creative community, right? So anything from the creative community, visual arts, design, performance, theater, music, and it's the platforms that allow those practices to contribute to the overall kind of GDP, right? So how much, where commerce is influenced by the creative corner of the greater community.
Yeah.
And Jodie?
I have the same definition. I think it's important to say that the orange economy was looked at more closely because it was kind of this invisible revenue for a long time. Mm-hmm. So persons weren't really quantifying it. And it's hard to quantify cultural currency versus the overall GDP, like John says. But over the past, maybe I'm young, so I don't really want to put a number to it and erase person's work. But I think over time, as more governments have been looking at that specific revenue stream, we've been able to define it more and see and look at the possibilities of what else can be extracted from this economy.
Right. It also too is a lot of times the creative contribution was kind of seen as a non-tangible contribution, and I mean something that you can measure in dollars and cents.
Yeah.
And I think it was UNESCO
Yeah.
that actually initiated the study that actually went in and started to research, well, how much money do artists make and how much does that contribute to nation building, and how much do musicians make, and how much do people pay for tickets, and how much do graphic designers charge for their services, and so on and so forth. And then I think what was discovered was that this contribution was a lot more significant, a lot more complex than people had imagined. And then people started to recognize that this orange economy was a real thing, and that it became something that people could like mechanize in their own organizations to enhance things.
So in 2015, I think we had a conversation here, and I didn't want to quantify it, but 2015 was the year, and there's actually a book that was published by UNESCO with all of that data called The Orange Economy, and the PDF version is online if anybody wants to look for it.
Oh, awesome. So we Googled, because we had to do some research about the orange economy, and what we found was basically the same thing that you both said. So it's such a broad economy, and it has been around since the dawn of time. We just started like identifying it as the orange economy, but it's been here, right? So we looked on Google, because Google has everything, and we found the definition. So on Google, it says, the orange economy is a production model where goods and services have intellectual value because they are the product of ideas and expertise of their creators. And then the orange economy is also known as the creative economy. And like we said, it's so broad. There's so many things that fall under that. And John, like you said, you wear so many hats, and Jodie, you also wear many hats. So we're going to break down what all is included in the orange economy. So there are several categories, and the first we have is design and visual arts, and that's where you have your painting, your sculptures, photography, and the sorts. And in the Bahamas, we have really great.
Talented.
Listen.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at you right now.
Right. But also outside of you both, we have some amazing artists who have also been working with international celebrities like Stanley Babb, who's also known on Instagram as Stan Low Photography. Yeah. And he photographs.
He
photographs, thank you, celebrities like Portia Smith and so many others, right? And then we have Jamal Roll, and he draws iconic photos. Really good. And he did some work on like the late Sir Sidney Poitier, and then Buddy Hield and Shawnee Miller-Weeble, and they are all our celebrities, our personal Bahamian celebrities, I love that. Right? And then we have tourism and cultural heritage, which is where you would find like junk canoe and tours around the Bahamas to maybe like forts and stuff and what have you. And then we have new media and software, right? And that's the websites, the graphics, all of those things. And then we have performing arts, like theater, dance, which I love. I love, love, love. And then we have music. That's a big Bahamian thing with songwriting. And in the Bahamas, we have amazing songwriters and musicians, such as Ronnie Butler. Then we have Tony McKay, who wrote a song called Exuma the Obeah. And that particular song was actually featured in a recent American film called Nope. And it was written by an Oscar Emmy winner, Jordan Peele. Yeah. So that's a really big deal because we are now we have ever been more so in the international stage, but for that to happen, I think that's a really big deal. And because it's current, a lot of the younger generations, they got an appreciation for Bahamian music through that film. And then lastly, literary arts, which is where you have your book writing, magazine writing, etc. So it's a mouthful. It's a mouthful.
But it's good for the audience to know because, like we said, it's so vast. Some people just hear orange economy and they're like, okay, so what about it? But it's good to know that we have all these different areas, and if you may find yourself falling under these categories, you're like, oh, well, I'm too a part of the orange economy because we have a lot of talented Bahamians who all under those sectors that Jasmine just mentioned. So just carrying on with the episode, we wanted to really get in depth with our two guests here. So we have a few questions to ask you.
Okay.
We want to get personal. We want to know the people who are actually a part of this economy. So I'll ask Jodie first. One of my first questions I thought of, because I wanted to ask like interesting, not just boring, like tell me about yourself.
That's fine.
So in like the most pretentious way possible, you know, very, I guess, conceited or condescending, like arrogant, whatever. Describe your art style or, you know, the way that you work. I want to hear it.
Pretentious. In the most pretentious way, I am a multimedia interdisciplinary artist.
Oh, I love that.
Which all means the same thing, actually. But yeah, so in my art form, the idea is the driving force. So I work with a few different concepts, and those concepts are executed by whichever medium I think fits best to translate the idea, if that makes sense. So if I want to relay a woman dancing, I may do that in a performance rather than a painting. Or if I want to, depict a flower, I would draw it rather than photograph it. So that's the way that I tend to go about my artistic practice. And it's changing now because I have a job. So I don't have as much time to do certain things. So I'm in a stage now where I'm just trying to be open to what the evolution of my practice looks like in this time of my life.
Sean, we want to hear from you.
I've got to follow Jodie. I think, so I am a mixed media artist, not unlike Jodie. I just think of my artistic process as solving problems. So I'm not wedded. I'm not a custodian of any one discipline or another, but I do feel like I'm, versed in the things that help me communicate effectively. So I typically I was trained in printmaking. I also have an illustration degree, which is kind of unusual. I don't think people would actually think that I do, but I do. I make objects, installations, kind of like what Jodie said, not to steal her answer, but I think I need to kind of cut and paste her answer. Because I think we have a similar way of thinking about making work. I'm I'm very inspired by collaboration, especially now as I'm older. Like I really I'm inspired by doing things with other people. John Beadle, who is a very good friend of mine, and is also a mentor of mine. In my early days, when I first came out of art school, he and I were talking, and he said, you should never approach anything in your practice thinking that you can't, that there are limitations to what you could do, because you can do anything you want to do, and anything that you cannot do alone, you can do it collaboratively. And so that's kind of a mantra that I kept dear to myself. I feel very, very lucky because I have some very, very good friends who are very, very good artists. And I feel like that's rare. My peers are my heroes. And also when I was a lot younger, I realized that all of my heroes needed to be younger than me. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I roll.
That was good. That was really good.
So I have another question I want to ask. I know when briefly I kind of got into photography because I majored in journalism, but both of us did. Mm-hmm. But when I had my photography class, I started taking pictures, and I'm like, I kind of noticed like the world around me a little bit more. I kind of started seeing things a little bit more beautiful. I was looking at flowers, it's like, whoa. Like you just, all of a sudden you poking out at me. So I said that to say, how has art kind of changed your perspective and view of the world? Maybe your outlook of social issues, or even personally, how has art in, multimedia, whichever way you do it, how has it changed your perspective and view?
I feel like me and John have the same brain. But I was gonna say that art, for me, the foundation of any artistic practice is problem solving, which means that I believe that there's a solution to any problem that arises in the world. So I go about my everyday, like, if this is a problem, I can and will find a solution, because that's just how my brain works.
Wow.
So I don't, I get a bit prickly when people talk about things in ways in which they are stoic, like they're immovable, like this thing has to stay this way. I'm like, no, I could like make a painting and solve the, world hunger or something.
World peace.
World peace, but so I think art has helped me to keep like a foundation of, or an anchor of, anything is possible. And if something doesn't exist in the world, I could create it to happen in the world. And like John said, if I can't do it by myself, then I know about 10 people who will, band together and help me make this thing happen. So I would say that. And then I deconstruct a lot of everything. So I really want to know how things work. Even if it's just like theoretical, like if I want to know how a government works, I will do the research and figure out how it works. So if I want to know how, to put on makeup, like eyelashes, then I will, figure that out myself. So I think art gives you a good conceptual and theoretical like foundation to move through the world in whichever way you see fit.
Yeah. I think that for me, my practice, or the kind of perspective that my practice has kind of given me, is that art makes the impossible possible.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like it just
Inspiring me.
it just doesn't. Listen,
Wow.
it just does, right? I mean, things work. Art doesn't. I say things work, but I mean, I think that's the great thing about it. Art doesn't have to make like literal sense. I think that sometimes we try to like rush to conclusions, and sometimes art just, whether it's music or painting or dance or all of it, the best of it kind of informs and takes us to a place that maybe sometimes is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Oftentimes a place where these are so many aspects of life in general just kind of want to be so logical and make sense and be quantifiable and this and that, but there's so much artwork that inspires me that just kind of feels like it lives in this space of uncertainty. And it's just so powerful because it feels like it enables people to kind of just reckon with things that are very difficult to understand and difficult to comprehend. But the artistic practice and process makes it feel like, it allows people a gateway to kind of feel like, okay, well, being in the process is probably as good as knowing what the answer is.
Yeah.
For me, what I'm comprehending from both of your answers is that maybe art is like spiritual. Like you can feel a spiritual connection, because you said it makes things that you would think would be impossible possible. And then you were saying, Jodie, that it helps you. What were you saying? Anyway, you were both saying like the same thing. And it sounds to me like art is this spiritual thing. And then when you don't really know, like in religion, for example, when you can't really find an answer, you would like give it to a higher power. That's what it sounded like art does.
Yeah, it's a bit of a transformation, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot like a faith, in a way. And I say that, I cringe a little bit when I say that because I don't want that to get too specific and boxed in.
Right.
But there is a process that I think that a lot of people struggle with, like just looking at certain things. Like look at these paintings behind you. So what is that supposed to mean? And you're like, what do you mean? What is that supposed to mean? It doesn't mean anything, and it means everything at the same time, right? So, I think the more you know, the more the suggestions become more specific, or more, not specific, but more contextualized. But like as Jodie says, you just become more in awe of like how vast everything is, and how meaningless knowing things actually is.
Yeah. And I was also going to say that I think art forces us to be present, like to properly engage with it. You have to be present, and being present is not something that you think you're present when you're like in conversation with people and like you think you're here.
Everywhere.
But when you watch a performance or you watch a theatrical performance and you feel, or with music, or you watch dancing, like, and you feel the emotion that's coming through, it's because you're actually present in that moment and you're engaging with all of your senses, which then creates, which translates to you a response in your body. And then that then feels spiritual because
It does.
you are just doing what you're supposed to do in your everyday life, which is to be present.
Wow, and to connect.
Yeah.
No, it feels very much so. I mean, I was thinking about it just recently, like how, like the best art will kind of like move you to tears, like it makes you emotional, right? And I was just thinking, I guess, I don't know, like I think maybe it's like esoteric or whatever, but I think like how grateful I am for every artist, like ever, for just doing that, when you could listen to like a lyric in a song, or like go into a space and look at an installation, or just look at a good piece of design, or hear somebody talk about their practice, and it's like wow, it is, you know what I mean, like it makes the day worth the while. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other areas, but I just don't know. I'm saying, but certainly in the creative sphere, like I am moved by the creative sphere. I'm not necessarily moved by other things, but definitely like, and you could see it, even my good friend Jodie, maybe she will get to it. She curated a show for a turn of a very, very good friend of mine, Heino Schmid. And I don't know if you named that show or he did, whatever. And the show is just called In This House There Is a Home. Even that makes me want to cry. And I'm just like, wow, like what an amazing, because it just like fits like the way that this artist thinks about what he's doing and his practice and the material and the process and the like, there's just this kind of like honesty with the work, and I'm just like, wow, like I get chills thinking about that. Like I don't get chills thinking about the news,
right?
You know what I mean, and other things like that. Like I just don't really, like I'm not really sure. Like I not getting it.
About that.
Yeah.
I can hear and I can feel the passion.
Yes,
And
I love that.
I would like to know, where is this passion coming from? Where did it stem from? How did it start? So we can start with Jodie. How did you become the artist that is Jodie?
Wow, that's a good question. It was something, actually, it's so funny because I saw an artist, Marlon Hunt. I remember my mom is an architect, I should say that, and she used to draw with me as a child. So whenever, like she would be at a desk like drawing, and I'd be like, Mommy, I want to draw, and she would just like, turn around and draw with me. So I always had that practice of like making with her in my free time, or if I'm like, Mommy, I'm bored, and this is, pre game devices and stuff, she would always have like paper and pen for me. So I just would sit down and draw all the time, to the point where her colleagues at work would save their paper for me. So I'm like, okay, the kids come in, well, Jodie has all this paper for you. So yeah, it was always something that I just like innately felt like I needed to do. And then the passion stemmed from just, I think, being in college and just seeing the possibilities of moving from the place of I can't or I don't know to, oh my God, I did. And then having that happen like over and over and over again. Because it's one thing for people to say, well, I need you to like, and Heino Schmid, who John just mentioned, he was my drawing professor. And he was like, okay, well, I need you to draw, this cup. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, draw this cup, get the value of it. And this is my first time doing something like that. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And my brain is breaking and I'm having a panic attack. And I just don't know what's, how do I take something that I see related to my hand and then put it on paper? And when you do that, like the first 2-3 times, you're like, oh my God, like, what is even happening? And so it's just knowing that, and I think that's where my I could do anything thing comes from, is because if I could do that and it looked in real life how it looks on my paper, then I could do anything. You can't tell me I can't do nothing.
Yeah, true.
And what about you, John?
It comes from a lot of different places, right? I think it depends on, I guess, the mood or the that I'm in at the time when you ask me the question. But like, I feel like it comes from a lot of different spaces. I know for me, it's interesting that Jodie says that she was inspired by her mother, who's an architect. So you know, and architects are in the built environment.
Right.
And so my father was a civil and structural engineer, and so he worked with a lot of architects. And I think I took it for granted, right? So oftentimes in previous interviews, people would ask me the same question. I would say, oh, it was the house that I grew up in. And people were like, that makes no sense. But it makes complete sense, because I think that we take for granted the environments that we're in a major way, and how they affect us. Like, I think if we are just aware of the effect that the environment has on us, whether it's positive or negative, it helps shape you, right? Because a lot of people are informed or develop their art practice from some kind of trauma or some kind of negative scenario, right? And that helps them have the most beautiful and successful practice. And some people it's like positive creates more positive, or positive creates effective, and some people it's like negative creates effective and positive. But for me, I think, you know, I grew up in this house that was like a mid-century modern house, which was designed by an architect like of note, who was like a recognized architect, you know. And I think most people don't know. I mean, maybe you guys know, but other people, if you said, can you name me like 5 architects, they were like, like, I know what an architect is, but I could not name one. And these people are designing the bathrooms that you know, use every day, and how big is your bedroom, and how big is the office that you sit in, and, you know, like spaces like that we're in now. Somebody had to decide. Somebody made a decision, and we're dwelling within this decision.
An amazing
and
decision.
So I always just kind of felt like this hyper awareness came from, I think, subconsciously, because I didn't like my house when I was little, because it was very unusual. Like, it just felt like I can't tell what's inside and outside. Like, I can't tell, is this the patio or is this the living room? Because the walls would they had these like receding pocket glass doors that would like disappear. They were just a glass door, but the way they would like slide into the wall. And so my father worked with this architect, and because they were so into what they were doing, they kind of realized that they could make this, they could collaborate and do this really amazing thing architecturally and from a structural engineering perspective. And so the house had no air conditioning, it had no this and that. So it had all of the spoils that like other houses that I like naively were like, oh, I want my house to have carpet and AC and whatever. This house had none of those things. And so it wasn't until like I got like older, I was like, wait a second, like, this is actually interesting. Or I learned about other architects, and I was like, what, this kind of looks a lot like the house that was in here. And so like I came to art, my creative process, through like building. I was always very didn't feel like I had a very good sense of like the traditional academic pathways that people would get into art, like being able to like draw well, like render. I always struggle with that. I was like, man, I can't translate it as well as other people are translating it. But if you said like, can you make this table? Like, I was like, I could definitely make the table. And I could make the drawings that would show you how to make the table. And then after a while I recognized, like Jodie said, that Heino told her, if you could draw the cup, you could do anything. Then I realized, well, if I could make the table, I could pretty much do anything.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it kind of felt like it all leads to one place.
Yeah. So I kind of want to know, like, your mind, like how it works when you guys are creating a piece. Like, what is that like? Like, what is the journey like? Whatever piece it may be, because I know you guys do multimedia. So kind of walk us through that process. You don't have to give us all your tea, all the details, but I kind of want to get into that. Like, what's the process like for you all? Jodie, you go first.
Oh. I think it depends. Like it's changed for me over the years, obviously, but I know I am a bit more formulaic now because my time is very small.
Can you repeat that?
Like I have a formula to things.
Okay.
Now,
So how was it in the past?
Kind of. I think I did a lot of. I leaned into that like, oh, how I feel kind of thing, and I realized that's not sustainable.
Okay.
So, yeah. Now I'm like, I will take 50 photos, go through the 50. You know, like that kind of way is what I operate now. But after I've like made a decision about, like I said, idea and concept comes first. So I'm like, okay, what do I want to talk about? This. What is the best way to communicate that? Okay, let's say painting. Cool. What are you gonna use to then like illustrate in the painting? Because paintings to me are like stories. I feel like you have to constantly be like, every time you come back to a painting, you have to like read another part of the story. So I'm like, okay, well, what characters are my story? So on and so on. So I find that, do that, have the drawing on the canvas or paper or whatever, and then when I paint, I just let the paint tell me when to.
I will.
No, but because there's a limitation in everything you do. There's a limitation, and some limitations you could push, and some will you will hit the wall.
Yeah.
And I think the thing about being a painter specifically is that oil paint will do what you want it to do, and then it won't. So there's a point where I just let the oil paint stop, or like I make a mark, and I'm like, I really want to go into that, but some like this thing blended with this thing in a way that created something that I couldn't do by my own hand. So I just let it happen, and that's how I try to approach my paintings now, just with limitation and restraint.
And before we go to John, Jodie, you said that you let the paint tell you what to do.
Yeah.
In some research, I actually saw that another artist said that he does the exact same thing. He allows the material, the woods, the paint, whatever he uses to tell him what to do. And I was like, wow.
Because
It's so amazing.
it's a
I've never
collaboration
thought of
still.
that.
It is.
It's still a collaboration because the paint is coming with what all the paint has. And I know that this is going to sound very heady to people, but like it's just like cooking. Like onions will only do certain things if you put them with certain things. So you can't like make a potato out of an onion. So I can't make oil paint work in the way that I would. And then if I do want to, that's a whole other process. And then I have to determine whether that process is necessary for what I want to communicate in this particular piece. So
Everything just feels so profound.
I know, like I'm just absorbing this all. But John, I want to hear from you as well.
Yeah, and I just feel like I want to like respond to what Jodie said because I think it's so brilliant. I mean, I think you observe other people's practice, right? So what she's talking about with the material being a collaborator, it is collaborating. You're collaborating with the material. Whether or not it's a successful collaboration is a different story. And I think when those open lines of, for lack of a better word, communication between you and the material happen. I mean, Jodie operates with a sense of mastery that when you look at things, people who are very, very good at what they do make what they do seem effortless. Like not like easy in the sense that it's like cheap in the sense of like effort, but like there's a degree of like, wow, like can you imagine like this person is doing what they're doing with this? Like Jodie does it, Heino does it, a bunch of people. I can name like 1,000 people who do it, right? But like there's a degree to which what she was talking about, like you understand what the possibilities of the material are, and then you let the material do what it can do.
yeah.
But I remember one time in my dad's office, there was a guy, carpenter in there, and he needed to cut a curve. And this is like a roundabout way of answering your question, because I think metaphorically, this is how I wish, or how I aspire my practice to be, right? Like I don't need like perfect conditions in order for things to be perfect, right? Like you just need to be, like if you just need to understand your environment and get it done. This guy had to cut a curve out of off the corner of a piece of wood. Off a corner of a piece of wood. And normally you would do that technically with a jigsaw, with a blade that has like a saw that has like a single small blade that goes up and down very fast, and it can curve through the wood. And he didn't have that. He had a circular saw, which is a saw that has a very different mechanism, a blade that's quite long and is not very maneuverable. And I saw this guy just angle the corners off this piece of wood. He just like kept, and he basically shaved a perfect corner off of this piece of wood with a tool that was not designed to do that. And I was like, wow, like that feels like my practice, like everything I approach. I feel like sometimes in the most beautiful way, I'm not designed to actually do this. And this is the thing that is going to make the object that I create unique. And I used to spend a lot of time thinking about the imperfections of my work and going, oh, this is not good. Oh, I look at so-and-so's work and they do this.
The finish.
Oh, the finish isn't like this. And it took me a while because I'm a lot older than everyone in this environment right now. But I also take a message from other people who are older than me. And I was like, well, this is actually your work. It takes you a while to recognize like who you are. Because creatively, a lot of people try to be other people.
Right.
Oh, I want to be like this person.
But you're not that
Oh,
person.
I want to be this singer. Oh, I want my work to be like this person. And you're never going to be that other person.
Right. And why should you shouldn't want to be.
Right. And so the process is, I don't even remember what your question was, but I was just like responding to Jodie's answer, which was amazing.
But you guys talk about it so beautifully, the collaboration between you and the paint or the work. But what happens when that collaboration ain't working out? Like, what do you do to navigate that process? Or you come up with like mental blocks, or you're struggling to finish a piece. Like, how do you guys overcome that?
I just leave it alone and do something else.
Just walk away?
Yeah.
You might need
Makes
to leave
sense.
it alone. It makes sense to not
Force it.
to not force the romantic idea that, oh, you should be making work and whatever. I remember when the pandemic happened, everyone was like, oh, everyone has so much time at home, you should be making so much work. I was like, no,
That was a lot of pressure.
I'm actually like afraid that the
Yes.
world is ending. I don't even think I want to be making work right now.
Like, what do you mean? I should be hustling.
Yeah.
You know? So I think you just have to let it be. Sometimes sometimes people will say to me, oh, how long does it take you to make that painting? And I said, well, there's two answers. Like, how long would it take for me to make it again? That I've already done to make a copy of it? I could do that super fast.
Right.
Okay.
But how long it actually took Jason Bennett to make the painting that's over your head, I don't know. It might have taken him 5 years to make that.
Yeah.
Or he might have been inspired in a weekend and made it. You know? So it definitely it's not a clear answer. That's the beauty of it. I feel like that's the beauty of how impossible it is to follow.
Yeah.
Is what makes it unique, right? Because if it
definitely.
becomes otherwise, then it becomes
Systematic.
Systematic.
And robotic, and then you could almost tell when the
tell.
magic is not there. So I think sometimes
Wow.
it's that thing. I think because there's an idea in your head of what this thing looks like that doesn't exist anywhere else but your head. So you're trying to make the thing in front of you be the thing in your head. And the tension is in that translation. But if you then, divorce yourself from the thing in your head, be present with what's in front of you and say, oh, actually, and that takes some time for me specifically. So that's why I leave things alone, because then once I divorce myself from like an expected outcome, I could come back to it, see it for what it is, and be like, oh, I actually just need to like do this. Okay, it's done.
Come with
And
fresh
then-
eyes.
Right, and then move forward. But you could tell, and it's just, and I think too sometimes we're pressured to. I think art should be art. I just
Put it
that's
on a
Plain and
shirt.
simple.
Put it on a shirt.
Plain
we
and
need that
simple.
on a
Art
shirt.
should
because
be
like
art.
you could tell when I think art for the sake of expression, art for the sake of like solving a problem, art for the sake of something that is just like this thing doesn't need to be in the world, but I think it should have a place in the world, so I will make it. I think that should be a thing, because then you could tell art that's made for profit, which is not a problem. But I think I work in a vein of like, I want my art to be that. I don't want to lose the mysticism of it. And when you try to marry the two is when you get like that force and that creative block, and you could tell.
It almost sounds to me like communicating with an actual person, So when you're having tension and you're not seeing eye to eye, you're like, you know what? Just give me some space.
I gotta go.
Right. Let's revisit this tomorrow when we're
Yeah.
both in a better
Headspace.
place. Right. So it sounds like you're actually interacting with another being.
I love the therapeutic nature and the way that you guys describe the process, because someone, like, I say that because as someone, I actually came here, I don't know if John remembers saying, but I came here for an art class back in February, and I struggled so hard because I overthink a lot.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it. And that was the purpose of me coming here. Like, I knew like that I would have that experience because I know the type of person I am, and I wanted to push myself to stay in art class. I wanted to leave like an hour through. I even started to cry because I'm like,
Cried?
no, not like tears came down, but
Right.
you know, like when you're just so frustrated because you're the type of person who normally gets it and you don't. And I know that art would bring me to that point. So hearing you guys talk about just let it flow, like I'm like, how? Like how?
There's a word like we use the word rigor,
Yeah.
right? And that's something that I feel like a lot of artists will refer to, you know. And I think it's okay for it to be hard. It's sometimes it's beneficial. Like art needs to make you cry a little bit because it's worth a while. You know, teachers make art students cry,
I can imagine.
not on purpose,
Right,
But
right.
it happens, and I think oftentimes when it does happen, people remember those moments.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever made anybody cry, but I've certainly been in classes where other people have broken down, and sometimes it's just like because the instructors
You're
just
trying to
just
break all
asking
these
questions too.
boundaries,
They're just
yeah.
asking questions, and they go like, "I'm not trying to get
yeah.
under your skin. I'm just asking you questions." And I think just the revelation of the questions is like,
Yeah.
wow, like it just undoes how twisted up sometimes you get creatively, and then you gonna get out of your own way, and just the kind of that same crying is like that emotion is not unlike the emotion that I was talking about earlier. When you like hear the lyric in the song and it like gives you chills, like it's the realization, it's the connection that causes that to happen. And sometimes it's embarrassing. Like, oh, people are thinking this and that, and usually nobody is thinking what you're thinking.
Yeah.
They're probably holding back tears too.
Yeah.
I love that. So our producers are telling us that, you know, it's time to wrap up.
Even though I want to talk
unfortunately.
more, but you know.
All right.
So, okay, so we've been enjoying the conversation so far, and we're actually going to have 2 episodes on the orange economy. So for our viewers, stay close. And we also want to talk about like the NFTs, what intellectual property is, and all of the sorts in episode 2. So for now, thank you so much for joining us, to our audience, and check us out in episode 2. This is The Rewind.